graphic books, particularly on our shelves. And a lot of these were independent graphic books, which meant that they were not being published by mainstream publishing houses. And at that time, among mainstream publishing houses, I think HarperCollins was championing, graphic books in a big way. Partly because at that point, HarperCollins, the publishing head was V.K. Karthika, who's always been interested in the genre of graphic books. So I remember seeing this kind of a accumulation of titles in the HarperCollins list, and then not too much from the rest of the publishing houses. And then most of the others were independent sort of titles coming from authors themselves or from organizations. And then there were some which were coming out of independent presses, beginning to come out of independent presses. 2013 onwards, 2013 is when we brought out our second, Yoda Press brought out our second graphic book as well. It was called This Side, That Side. And it was the first graphic anthology on partition in South Asia. And also in a lot of ways, we sort of, with that title, I mean, we ourselves got very interested in the form of the graphic anthology. And at that point, we saw a number of other presses getting interested in that form. Of course, someone who had already championed that form was Bharat Murthy with his, Comics India self-publishing setup that was already in place around 2010, 2011. Blaft had done some graphic books at that time. Zuban did some soon after we did our second one. And then we did a few fairly soon after that. And then I found that suddenly there was a kind of a, if I may say so, graphic books stopped being championed in that way for a few years. And then I find the last 2 or 3 years, they're back again, and they're back in a big way. And this time I feel like there is a huge range of publishers, artists, galleries, organizations, artists themselves championing, bringing them out. And finally, I find that a lot of the digital space is also being put to use to disseminate and market graphic books by all of these people. So it's been a bit of an up and down, I think, from between 2009 and now. But I think finally we're in a space where we can talk about a very, very thriving graphic books arc happening in India with confidence, I think. Sorry, long answer, but I thought it's good to kind of just, trace the trajectory a bit. Yeah.
We had a little bit of a technical problem in the beginning where I was introducing everyone. So just quickly introducing Arpita Das from Yoda Press, Bandana, Tulachan, Chandri, and Sadhna Prasad. So apologies for the technical problem. It happened on Facebook. And I'll go quickly to Bandana. And apologies if you could let me know I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Thank you, Sabin. It's wonderful to be here. And thank you for having me. My name is pronounced, it's almost, okay, it's Bandana. And so to talk about how it is in Nepal with graphic novels, I think in Nepal, short form comics are much more popular at the moment. I see a lot of young artists posting on social media, and web comics are like really popular form of expression, and people are telling all sorts of stories from horror to personal narratives, which is really exciting. As a part of Virangana Comics myself, we've been working to promote promote comics and graphic novels as a medium of telling personal narratives. And we have also published an all-women graphic anthology. So yeah, so there is an interest in graphic novels and comics, but if we look at the publishing scenario, it is very limited. We don't have much going on, I'm sad to say. And so people do like to read comics and graphic novels, but even in the bookstores, it is very hard to get like titles, even from South Asia and even the West, and like popular titles. So that's how it is at the moment. But it is really sad, because I feel like historically we do have like sequential storytelling in the form of visual like images, like in traditional scroll paintings and such things, that tell stories about religious stories. Yeah, but in modern times, I think we have a lot to do and a lot to explore. That's all I'd like to say.
Thank you so much. Chandri, I want to add something, asking you, how does, through the graphic novel, you can see representation as well. So how is it with your community when it comes to graphic novel, and how do they feel with the Aravani art project as well? You're on the mute.
Yes, I'll have to just translate this for her. Chandri, one enna kekra ki graphic novel நம்ம எந்த மாதிரி புக் பண்ணிருக்கோம் இல்லையா, முன்னாடி டெக்ஸ்ட் புக்லாம் வருமே படிக்கிற மாதிரி, அந்த மாதிரி ஃபர்ஸ்ட் டைம் நம்மளும் வேலை பண்ணிருக்கோம். கம்யூனிட்டிலேயே அந்த மாதிரி ஃபர்ஸ்ட் டைம் புக் பண்ணிருக்கா. சோ அந்த மாதிரி புக் கம்யூனிட்டிக்கு எப்படி இருந்தது? இப்ப நீ ஹோஸ்கோடெக் காமிச்சி இந்த மாதிரி புக் பண்ணிருக்கோம், சாந்திக்கு எப்படி இருந்தது, உனக்கு எப்படி இருந்ததுன்னு கேக்குறேன்.
ஆக்சுவலி வந்துட்டு ஃபர்ஸ்ட் டைம் இந்த மாதிரி ஒரு புக் வந்திருக்குது வெளியே. அது நிறைய பேர் வந்துட்டு ரொம்ப சந்தோஷப்பட்டாங்க. இந்த மாதிரி வந்திருக்குது இல்லையா, லைஃப் ஸ்டோரி வந்து நல்லா இருக்குதுன்ட்டு கம்யூனிட்டில கூட நிறைய இன்கமிங் வருது, எனக்கு நல்ல சஜஷன் கொடுக்குறாங்க.
ஓகே, இரு 1 second. So she's saying that the community received it very well, because it's very rare that somebody wants to listen to a transgender story, because they kind of categorize them as a similar story, then read about somebody's story in detail of the everyday life of what's happened to her. So a lot of people contact her asking how come there is a story on her life, and how come that was rendered in a form of a graphic novel. சொல்லு.
ரொம்ப எனக்கு ரொம்ப சந்தோஷமா இருந்துச்சு, குஷியா இருந்துச்சு. ஃபர்ஸ்ட் டைம் என்னோட நேட்டிவ் பிளேஸ் போனது, சொந்த ஊருக்கு போனது, அங்க எல்லார்கிட்டயும் என் பத்தி தெரிஞ்சுக்கினது, கம்யூனிட்டில நிறைய பேரு என் பத்தி சொல்லிக்கிறது, அதெல்லாம் புக்ல வந்திருக்கு இல்லையா. ரொம்ப எல்லாருக்கும் ரொம்ப சந்தோஷமா இருந்துச்சு. பழைய ஆளுங்கள் எல்லாம் மீட் ஆகணும் அந்த டைம்ல.
Correct. So as a part of research for creating the graphic series, we visited Chandri's birthplace, to the places she used to be when she was in her teens, when she was in her 20s. So she got to revisit a lot of her old friends, old community, and she got to kind of tell them that she's been doing this in this form, and they got to see the form of it later, because that was very important for us, because this book was translated in Tamil as well, that we could circulate it to the people who were involved in the research, so they understand the process of why we are doing this. And she thought that was so important because it also reached the people whom she wanted it to reach.
True, and it would, I'm thinking that this is such an empowering thing to happen, right? And how, and there's this ownership
100%.
well.
I think even as an artist, for me, I have worked on something like a picture book or like a linear series of book myself, but it's been such a solo journey. To be somebody who's rendering somebody else's life and to have a complete different lens on it every time, and to really make sure that her life is shown as raw as it is, and not for a viewer. So it has a sentimental value when you're reading it, but it's just as real as it is. I think the research part of it was extremely important, and also a huge learning experience for me in terms of how we approach graphic storytelling as well, because we created a lot of emotional workshops with Chandri to kind of draw color wheels of what colors should we be using, what color has she related to in her life, to kind of segregate that. So the process was so intense even for me as an artist, it was super interesting to see the final product. That okay, I remember discussing with her mother about certain color, and we've incorporated that. So we just went to the smallest of the details to try and make this novel about her. Yeah.
That is so beautiful. And I'd like to ask, there's a lot of argument, coming to, the foundations, and there's this confusion about, how you label a graphic novel. Is it a genre? Is it a medium of expression? Should we really be putting the graphic narrative in a box? After all, it is an art form. And I'll start with you, Sadhna.
To be very honest, I was going to address this when you asked me what do you think about graphic novel in India. Because when I was studying, the graphic novels I was exposed to were extremely well done, and they were really arty, and they had great storylines. So for somebody who had a more raw approach to her art, I felt like maybe I didn't fit in there. I think in the last 5-6 years, the horizon is definitely opened. We consider a lot of stories also a part of graphic novel. Before we did this, we did a story where it was part of the Kadak anthology, where we did our take on the bystanders, which was again a trans person's point of view of what she thinks of bystanders in India. I don't think these stories I grew up reading as part of graphic novel, and the fact that we've transitioned there now is really good, because I was exposed to I was studying in London, and there was No Brow Press there, and they have a really varied range of graphic novels that they produce. So it was very nice. I mean, I think in the last 4 to 5 years, we have also kind of started incorporating all of that in a graphic novel space.
Chandri, would you like to add to that?
Chandri mute la irukku. So basically அவங்க கேக்குறாங்க கி முன்னாடி எல்லாம் கிராஃபிக் நாவல்னா அவ ரொம்ப நல்லா டிரா பண்ணுவா இல்லையா, முன்னாடி அந்த பேட் புக்ஸ் எல்லாம் படிப்போமே சூப்பர் ஹீரோ பத்தி அதெல்லாம். ஆனா இப்பதான் இப்ப நம்ம ஸ்டைலும் கிராஃபிக் நாவலா போச்சு. நம்ம அந்த புக் பண்ணோமே, இப்ப நம்ம ஸ்டைலும் கிராஃபிக் நாவலா போச்சு. இப்ப என்ன கேக்குறா கி கிராஃபிக் நாவலுக்கு அந்த மாதிரி ஸ்டைல் மட்டும் இருக்கணுமா, இப்ப நம்ம பண்ற மாதிரி வேற யாராவது பண்ற மாதிரி வேற எல்லாமோ ஸ்டோரி எல்லாம் சொல்லலாமா?
இல்ல இது ஒரு ஃபர்ஸ்ட் டைம் தான் நம்ம பண்றது. நல்லா தான் இருந்துச்சு. ஏன்னா நான் என் கூட இருந்தவங்களை ஸ்கெட்ச் பண்ணது, ஃப்ரெண்ட்ஸுங்களை ஸ்கெட்ச் பண்ணது, அதெல்லாம் ரொம்ப நல்லா இருந்துச்சு. அது இன்னும் கொஞ்சம் இது ஃபர்ஸ்ட் டைம், நெக்ஸ்ட் டைம் இன்னும் கொஞ்சம் டிஃப்ரெண்டா பண்ணலாம் இல்லையா, நல்லா இருக்கும். ஃபர்ஸ்ட் ஸ்டார்டிங் பண்ணிருக்கோம் நம்ம, நெக்ஸ்ட் வந்தப்போ இன்னும் கொஞ்சம் டிஃப்ரெண்டா பண்ணலாம், இன்னும் நல்லா இருக்கும். இது first time that பண்றது.
She's saying that this was our first time exploring this medium as a collaboration, and since it was our first time, she also feels that the style we used and all of that was very raw, because we concentrated on the research a lot more. And if we went on it a second time and did like a part 2 on the novel, we would probably refine it and probably adapt things from the older graphic novel things. So we also kind of understand why certain molds were there, like why were certain things used in the graphic novel style.
Bandana, would you like to add to that?
Chandri mute.
Yes, I think I agree with Sadhna that this perception has been changing a lot in recent years. For example, I think it is because of what people were exposed to. Like when people thought about comics and graphic novels, people usually superhero comics or like newspaper strips that came to mind, right? So for the longest time, people just thought that was what graphic novels or comics were. And but with more exposure, like especially in Nepal, I think even I grew up reading a lot of Japanese mangas, and they have like such a range of topics and genres as well. So like I think for current generation, that is what people equate to when people think about graphic novels. But something interesting is, like, if you ask an older person in Nepal, what is a cartoon? They will probably say it is like satirical political cartoons that are printed in newspapers. So the perception is changing and will keep on changing. So I think as long as we publish like really diverse and interesting stories with like a lot of topics, this thing about putting graphic novels inside a box would definitely change.
Arpita?
Yeah, Sabine, for me, I mean, I feel the genres always has had tremendous range. Because I mean, when I was growing up, there was DC Comics and there was Marvel Comics, but the fact is, in India, we were giving it our own spin, and we were reading Amar Chitra Katha and Tinkle, and which was extremely desi. And I remember I used to subscribe to the Indrajal comics, and you could see how styles are so different between Flash Gordon and Phantom and Bela Bahadur in the same, sort of corpus of Indrajal comics. But of course, at that time, we were very much in comics territory, even with something like Asterix or Tintin. And then I think at some point, on the one hand, there's this exposure to manga. And of course, today with, my 18-year-old, I mean, it's grown into, that interest has grown into anime, of course. But at the same time, for us, I think younger than me, millennials, and for my generation as well, I think Joe Sacco, and his graphic novels played a very important role. And so did Mouse by Art Spiegelman, and Marjan Satrapi's work as well after that, and many others, which very clearly, made that shift from it's a comic form, but we're doing something else with it, and that's something else I feel has always been very varied. And as the genre grows within each cultural ecosystem, I think the people who make the books just become more and more confident with experimenting. And I mean, the fact is that while we might wonder about what's a comic and what's a graphic novel, it hasn't stopped, brilliant graphic books being made, say by Navayana, which has been done, using a completely indigenous art form to tell B.R. Ambedkar's life story, right? And I mean, even if I look at what we have published at Yoda Press, the graphic narratives, which are on Partition, or First Hand 1 and 2, which were also graphic anthologies edited by Vidyun Sabhani and Arijit Sen, the narratives themselves had such different vocabularies, and forms and styles, and they were coming from so many different places. And that was one of the part of the excitement of working with anthologies. But even if we think of the newer books, publications we've done, for instance, the graphic book by Ita Mehrotra on Shaheen Bagh, it is purely, the form is purely about bearing witness, in a sense. And that is the linchpin of that entire book. And then, another young artist we've published recently who did this very dystopic graphic book called Suit, which is based in the future. And it's essentially one day in the life of a Safai Karmachari who has been given a suit to keep him safe when he goes down into the sewers. And the question being asked again and again is that enough? Does that change his life, right? Because this is such a burning question. And that the style Samarth uses is almost sci-fi fantasy, it's very, very different. And then Ikroop Sandhu's biography of Bhagat Singh, which we have just published in collaboration with Simon & Schuster India. Again, I mean, she has brought her own sensibility as a Sikh woman from the same region, interestingly, that Bhagat Singh lived in, but a woman telling Bhagat Singh's story for the first time, because we are full of Bhagat Singh stories being told and dramatized in Bollywood by men, and him being turned into this macho cis-het icon. And here was a woman taking a completely different take on it. And so it looks very different too. And I mean, I could go on and on. You know, my point is that it's a genre that has so much possibility in terms of the form it can take. I got really one last thing, got very irritated at a couple of award ceremonies recently when we keep pushing our books, our graphic books to award ceremonies. They're always rejected. And someone actually responded by saying, "Ye to fiction bhi nahi hai, non-fiction nahi hai, ye to comic hai." And I was like, have you read it? Every story is either non-fiction or fiction. Na? I mean, even the graphic book is telling a story. If you read it, you'll understand that you've got to start looking at graphic books differently. They are not just an art form, Sabin. They are a storytelling, a means of expression and storytelling of the most explosive power right now, is what I'd say.
And again, why do we have this need to box something? Art cannot be boxed. That's the problem with this narrative that, you know, because it's Marvel, they cannot win an Oscar, or it's a graphic novel, so it's not serious literature. Why are we boxing it? And it speaks to the masses. It represents the masses, right? And my next question is, you know, I'll ask Chandri first. What value does visual narratives, the graphics, you know, illustrations, what value does it provide to the reader, to the masses, to the people? Because it is in fact a very powerful tool that speaks to the masses. With, you know, Chandri, you going back to your community and showing the book. So tell us a little bit about that, and why you think, or do you think it has found its rightful place?
Chandri கேக்குறா ki நம்ம இப்ப
சொல்லு.
draw பண்றோம் இல்லையா, illustration பண்றோம், இந்த புக் பண்ணிருக்கோம், அதோட பவர் என்னன்னு. இப்ப நீ அந்த புக் போய் இல்ல நம்ம illustration போய் யாருக்காவது காமிச்சா, கம்யூனிட்டி காமிச்சா, அவ அத பத்தி என்ன யோசிக்கிறா, அது அவ மைண்ட்ல சேஞ்ச் வருதா, நம்ம என்ன பண்றோம், அத பத்தி என்ன யோசிக்கிறான்னு கேக்குறா.
ஏன்னா புக்கு வந்திருக்கு நல்லதுதான். ஏன்னா கம்யூனிட்டிக்கு நம்ம எடுத்து போய் காட்டினா புரியுற மாதிரி அதுல இருக்கு. படிக்காதவங்களுக்கு கூட நம்ம பிக்சருங்க பார்த்தா அதுக்கு கரெக்டா புரியும் சில பேருக்கு. ஏன்னா நம்ம கம்யூனிட்டியில நிறைய பேர் இங்கிலீஷ் படிச்சிருக்கு கம்மி தான். அதுக்கு அந்த பிக்சர்லயே கொஞ்சம் பேருக்கு புரிஞ்சுக்கிறாங்க. அப்ப நானே தெரியாதவங்களுக்கு நான் படிச்சு காட்டுவேன் அந்த லைன்ஸ், இது இந்த பேராகிராஃப் இல்லையா, அது காட்டினா சீக்கிரமா அண்டர்ஸ்டாண்ட் ஆகும் அவங்களுக்கு.
Good. So a lot of people in the community have not finished their education, even if they've begun it. So visual medium is a great way for them to understand what we are doing in a form of a resistance or something to start a conversation. So they understand the narrative without having to read anything in between. They understand why certain elements are placed, what certain elements symbolize. And it acts as a great conversation starter even inside the community as to how they can actually, we talk a lot, it's especially for the community because they have so many elements, they don't really archive anything. They keep talking about the community is extremely rich in terms of culture and tradition and everything that they have done for the culture and tradition of India. So we keep talking about how we are archiving it. And so when they see these forms that we're kind of using it in some or the other graphic novel or an illustration, it seems like a great medium to kind of push their community out there.
And I'd like you, Sadhna, to add to that.
Yeah. I think, just a second. Sorry. Yeah, I think it's extremely important. I think because like, even if when we paint walls, since I also do that predominantly, what we put on the facade has to really relate to what you're trying to tell the community there. Because the wall, like I mentioned in the last call, it also belongs to the community that's living there. It doesn't belong to the people who paint it. And instead of writing things, when we express things through imagery, they kind of sympathize with what you have drawn, and they kind of also place themselves in that scenario, and they kind of make their own perception about the art. I think visual language is extremely strong to kind of start a conversation about topics that you want the community to discuss.
Absolutely. Arpita,
Yeah.
would you like to add to that?
Yeah, just one little thing, which is that, we've noticed the kind of barriers that we seem to be breaking down with the readership that we manage to access with graphic books. We've always seen that ever since 2007, when we published our first graphic book, A Little Book on Men. It's been very, very heartening and very gratifying to see that, there are many, many first generation English readers who will access the graphic books when they will not feel comfortable buying our other regular prose, and narrative books. And for me, that's a huge win. It's also a huge win when I'm talking about younger people getting interested in issues that, which, for me are very, very important, should be discussed by a younger demographic, but they might not feel very excited to pick up the narrative sort of texts or books that are available on these issues. For instance, the Partition graphic novel, or all the ones I've mentioned, whether it's, Bhagat Singh sort of coming alive for a younger generation entirely, with this new comic book, this new graphic book that Ikroop has drawn. And for me, that's also very important, because that kind of, cross-demographic and cross-generational kind of barrier breaking, when there is a genre that does it. I don't know about masses yet, Sabin, because I know that NCERT, I noticed that NCERT has been using, NCERT is in deep trouble right now. But the fact is, over the, there were years in the middle when they were trying to do some good stuff with the books they were making. And I noticed that they've been using a lot of comic genres in their social science textbooks, obviously because they felt they could explain difficult, dense, complex, perhaps tedious concepts, like perhaps in political science, through narrativizing via comic books. And these are interesting things that we are getting from the way these books are being, the way they're moving in the market. And I feel that there's a lot to learn, Yeah.
Bandana?
I think that people, like human beings in general, are very attracted to images, and that's why it makes it so powerful. As Chandra said, images also transcend, language barriers and are very accessible. And as an illustrator who works with images to communicate and tell stories, it's like really important part of storytelling for me. We can do so much with images. We can layer so much meaning inside illustrations, and so I think it's very effective in relaying information as well. So
Thank you so much for that. So there's a confession I want to make. I knew about comics. I loved, Archie comics and whatnot. But the first time I came across this term, the graphic novel, was during my adult time. And that too was after watching a movie, Sin City. And I found out about Frank Miller and then Neil Gaiman. So while we have seen a rapid rise in the production as well as interest in South Asian graphic novel in the past 1 decade, would I be wrong in saying that it has yet to receive the same amount of appreciation? And me being a novice here, that's my assumption. But is it yet to receive the same amount of appreciation and interest when you compare it with its Japanese or Western counterparts? I mean, we have examples of Amar Chitra Katha series, and then there's some comic books, and the first graphic novel by published by Zuka Books called Gray Matter. But is there what kind of appreciation and interest is there when you compare it with the Japanese or the Western counterparts? Arpita, I'll go with you first.
Well, I think Bandana said it very nicely initially when she said, I mean, it's still in the publishing scene, there seems to be such a lack of interest or knowledge about the genre, when she was saying bookstores won't really keep them. I mean, at that time, between 2009 and 13, when I had Yodakin, this wonderful bookstore called Fact and Fiction in Vasant Vihar in South Delhi, and Yodakin, my bookstore, we were the only two that were keeping comic books and graphic books. So, of course, now, thankfully, I notice at least in Delhi, in Bombay, and Bangalore, and Chennai, and Pune, some of these big cities. Calcutta, of course, has always been a great lover of comic books. It's been very different there. But there are, at least bookstores will keep some of the usual suspects, but will they champion young writers who want to make graphic books? I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, brick and mortar bookstores are anyway in so much trouble, but at the same time, I find there are those those bookstores which are run by avid readers, who themselves read the graphic genre, like Dog Ears in Goa, for instance, or Champaka in Bangalore. I mean, these are people who will probably read graphic books, and so they'll keep graphic books. They certainly keep all the ones we bring out. But I think there's still, like that award example I gave you, there's such a sense of stonewalling that we get when we send in our graphic books as entries. Obviously, that's coming out of some kind of not quite buying it yet mentality. And, I suppose that is what makes it still a difficult genre beyond a point to push, or to make sure that it gets the kind of attention it should get. But at the same time, my sense is that the readership of comics and graphic books is not diluted, It's a very, very loyal, faithful, avid readership. And that's what I think we really need to build on to get the genre out there.
One thing I wanted to mention, Arpita, you mentioned, bookshops. I went to Pakistan a few days ago, and I went to this, Liberty Books, which is and it had Marvel, it had, Neil Gaiman books, and but, I asked Meher, why isn't Gray Matter there? And she told me, certain reasons, and that brings me to the question. There may be appetite, there may be appreciation and interest, but when it comes to bookshops and booksellers, do they have the appetite?
I'll tell you something. What's really interesting is that graphic books sell a lot online. I mean, whenever we do a new edition or a new print run of an old edition, it's gone like that. And Sadhna's nodding her head. So, I mean, clearly she agrees, Online, there is such a buzz. On social media, there is such a buzz. You follow this Insta handle by George Martin Apupen in Bangalore called Brain Dead. And he promotes all the comics and comics makers and graphic books creators of South Asia. And he drives so much sales for all our books, you have no idea. And it really makes a real difference, So I don't get it. I don't get the why the brick and mortar bookstore, only if it's the kind of bookstore that is run by a person who reads comics will they keep it. The others, the chain stores, will never have it. It's a mystery. But Sadhna, wouldn't you agree that we are selling more and more in terms of?
I agree fully. Actually, Suit is a comic. I mean, Samat is a very good friend, and I think his comic is lovely. Like it's I think one of my favorite comics I read last year. I think he also did his maximum sales. I also discover new comics online, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't think I get that much variety when I go to a store as much as I get online. How much I can see. And for the last, I think in India, the first comic that I was buying was either from Blaft or from Tara Books. And because they were so available online, I really never took the effort to go to a bookstore to figure out what comics I should be getting. I think online is the market right now for comic books for sure.
Maybe it's because of the and just saying it out loud, maybe it's because of the readership. They're more millennials and Gen Z and I don't know. Is
also
that
more communities, more diverse,
I think Blossoms in Bangalore was the only, because it's a really large bookstore.
Yeah,
it does stock a lot more. So I think that's one of the rare bookstores where you'll find a mix of everything. I think it serves everybody, but a lot of bookstores don't. So you end up finding these bestsellers or the ones that are really going to go off their rack, not the experimental ones or the ones not everybody probably is going for.
Yeah, and you're right. We sold Suit more online than offline.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was driven entirely by social media. Sales were driven entirely by social media. But
So Bandana, how is it for you in Nepal? Same question.
I think we just in Nepal we just need to believe more in this medium, because like graphic novels are not really available, like even online or offline. So the access to books and the variety is really lacking, and that makes it hard for people to be inspired to produce, create, right? And even for publishers to believe that, oh, this will sell. So it just like we are at this stage that we just need more exposure, and I think that like the internet has really helped with that, at least because we get access to at least like what other peoples are doing like outside of Nepal, and that sort of like the online community and the platforms that provide reading services. I think those are the things that have been inspiring the current generation to create more comics. So we just need a lot of work in terms of creating and also consuming graphic novels.
Chandri, my question to you is about impact and representation. So what kind of impact have you seen through your work?
Chandri கேக்குறா கி இந்த 8 வருஷத்துல நம்ம வேலை பண்ணிருக்கோம் இல்லையா, அதோட ரெஸ்பான்ஸ் என்னெல்லாம் பார்த்திருக்கேன் நீ? எப்படி சேஞ்ச் ஆயிருக்கு?
நிறைய சேஞ்ச் ஆயிருக்குது. இது ஏன்னா இது ஃபர்ஸ்ட் இந்த மாதிரி டிரான்ஸ்ஜெண்டர் யாரும் இந்த மாதிரி இல்லவே இல்லை. ஏன்னா எழுதியிருக்காங்க சில பேர் புக்ஸ் எழுதியிருக்காங்க, இந்த மாதிரி நாம பண்ண மாதிரி யாருமே பண்ணல. நிறைய பேரு அப்ஸ்டேட் பண்றாங்க, சூப்பரா இருக்குது, நல்லா இருக்குது, உந்துல ஸ்டோரி எது பண்றாங்க.
So she's saying that not a lot of trans people have entered the art zone. A lot of them have written books and they write poems and they're out there, but not a lot of them have gotten into art so confidently that they are out there and they are painting. So it is very new, but also she's been getting only compliments, and also I think it's impacted the people well in forms of discussion as well, because they see these women walking around promoting art, talking about art, going to these festivals, going to a very traditional design festival, still representing art and talking about art and books. I think them being present itself is a big impact on that community. Yeah.
True. So, yeah, please go on.
நிறைய பேரு நானு Facebookல இன்ஸ்டாகிராம்ல ஒரு போட்டோங்க 4 போட்டோ அனுப்புறேன் இல்லையா, அப்ப நிறைய பேர் வந்துட்டு ரொம்ப ஃபோன் பண்ணி என்ன கேக்குறாங்க நல்லா.
So over the last 3-4 years, we also made sure they have their own personality and presence as artists on Instagram as well, because I think it's an extremely growing platform, and they do get they're capable of getting work for themselves, where they can design a book cover, or they can do something for themselves which is not really for the project, something they might enjoy doing. So through that, a lot of people have contacted them appreciating the work they've been doing.
That's beautiful. So we're at the end of our session, and I'd like each and every one of you to share any last words. Arpita, starting with you.
I don't know. I mean, I just hope we are getting to do something new with this genre soon. I mean, that's the plan at Yoda Press. We really want to kind of grow this genre, apt the press more and more, and to just sort of give it new life if possible. I'm talking about taking it into the realm of short animation maybe, or just sort of give it the kind of push that would be required to give the genre the kind of spotlight it deserves. And my friend Vishwajyoti Ghosh, who's a wonderful graphic artist, he is very much involved with us in confabulating about all this. Hopefully something interesting going forward.
Bandana?
Yeah, I think I just hope that this medium continues to grow, because I'm really, really passionate about graphic novels. I even wrote my dissertation for my bachelor's in graphic novels. So yeah, I really think this art form has a potential to tell really powerful stories, and stories that really matter. And so, and also I hope to get access to books and graphic novels from India and Pakistan and South Asia, because that I think this culture of sharing is really important to learn about each other and to uplift each other.
True. Chandri, any last words?
Sadhna,
இந்த லாஸ்ட்ல சொல்லணுமா?
ஒண்ணு இல்ல, இந்த மாதிரி எங்களுக்கு ஆப்பர்ச்சுனிட்டி கொடுத்ததுக்கு ரொம்ப தேங்க்ஸ். இது வேற இருக்கு இல்லையா?
She's thanking you for the opportunity that she could come on the call.
No, it's a privilege and honor for us, honestly, because inclusion is very important, and this is how we make this world a better place, when we talk and sit together and talk and engage and share happy moments together. So the pleasure and privilege is absolutely mine.
I just want to add, Chandri, Sadhna, at Yoda Press, we have been long-time fans of the Aravani Art Project. So more power to you all. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
would love to collaborate at some point if you guys are interested. So, sorry to do shop talk here, but
No, of course.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd also like to add, it's really
Yes,
nice to see Sadhna and
Bandana,
Chandri.
absolutely.
Come on.
Let's get in touch.
Yes,
Let's
yes.
get in touch.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, because we worked on the project together, right?
Yes,
Sadhna
we
and
did.
Chandri.
We're meeting each
Yeah,
other
it's
after
really
those
nice to
Zoom
see you
calls
here.
after 2 years.
Now, this is the conversation we should be having.
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah, actually, George Apupen keeps saying that the only way forward is if all comics creators and publishers and artists get together, and we have sort of a platform, and we
Correct.
have something that we are doing together. He often says that, and I listen to him, but nothing has come
Yeah.
of it. Let's see.
Yeah.
Arpita, we had another panel, Illustrated Resistance.
Yeah,
Mehrotra
Ita was there. Yeah.
Yes. And Samia, who's an illustrator from Pakistan, she was, her last words were that we need to collaborate,
Yeah.
so she was saying the exact same thing.
Yeah,
So everyone is thinking that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, because it is when the minute you think comics, graphic books, creators, communities, diversity, everything, we're all people who are sort of independents in a sense.
Correct.
Yeah.
Also, I
And,
don't think graphic novel is a one-person job.
Yeah.
It's not a one person trying to set it out. It has to be a collective effort of a community also giving the stories and letting us be a part and kind of letting us in. I think graphic novel is it's a teamwork. I don't think it's for one person to just sit in a room and do.
Absolutely. Much more so than any genre, any other genre of writing,
Absolutely.
because of bookmaking or of narrative making, absolutely 100%. Yeah.
thank you
So
so much.
let's hope.
Yeah, definitely. Sadhna, any last words? I didn't name you specifically.
Not really. I think when I did my first graphic novel, I realized it's the most intensive, yes, very nourishing process of making a graphic novel. I think the part where you're researching to the story writing, then the visuals become a very small part of what you're trying to do. I think it's a really, really, really powerful medium. And I hope I get to see more stories out this year as well.
Thank you so much, everyone, for this wonderful conversation. Arpita, Bandana, Chandri, Sadhna, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sabin.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so
Thanks
much
for
for
having
having
us.
us.
Thank you, Sabin.
Bye, Sabine.
Thank you.
Thank you.